Join us on Path of Faith, where we seek to inspire and empower you on your spiritual journey, offering guidance and support as you navigate life's challenges with faith and courage. Our life is always this equation of who we are with who we would like to be. Also, a little bit of who we used to be. It's not possible to conjugate the present moment without the combination of all of this. And the conjugation of the future, that time we're not even sure we'll have, depends on the wise articulation of the past we've had with the present we have today. It's this articulation that enables us to take steps, to walk, always believing that God's hand sustains us, but believing in the right way. Whenever I think of God's providence, I think of it as a favor that never ceases to be present in my life, but at the same time, never removes my possibility of doing my part. Because, my people, we have already learned, even psychology, pedagogy teach us that the good educator never gives his disciple the ready lesson. It would be a crime against the disciple to offer him the ready lesson. The master gives the certainty of his presence to remove any doubt, to be able to help, to dissolve what is hindering and harming learning. But at times, the disciple will have to live with his loneliness. The master remains silent and refuses to give the answer we so eagerly seek. Isn't that how life is? There are answers that only God can give us through his silence. That's also God's hand sustaining us. Because sometimes we have the illusion, and this is the result of naive vision. Unfortunately, religious discourse throughout our lives can give us naive visions that God will do everything for us, that God does this, that God does that. We have the right to believe in divine protection, but we are not relieved of the obligation to do our part, because it's a matter of wisdom, of maturity. The Father does this with the Son, the Mother does this with the Son. Love cannot make us think. The love that we know God has for us cannot make us think that He will do everything. I really like this expression. We only have the right to expect the impossible after we have done everything that was possible for us. So, yes, God protects us, but He also asks me to do my part in this protection. I pray to God for my life. I ask Him to give me health, but I need to do my part for that health to be a reality in my life, right? The care I have for myself is an expression of this part of mine, of the miracle I need to perform daily. So, sometimes I identify God's hand being present in my story, but not holding me as I think He does. Yes. Some forsakenness is too important in our human process. It would be very interesting if we learned this from the cradle, but unfortunately not, so it's never too late for us to learn. The unprotected feeling we sometimes feel in life is also God's hand, because those who love sometimes unprotect, so that you are exposed to what you need to live and experience alone. His presence always watching us, always guiding us, because that's very interesting. The more we grow, the more we mature in our experience with God, the greater our capacity to hear and understand His voice in our story. So, God protects me like this, even when He is distant. You know, it's not that He stays distant, it's that we feel that way because of life's situations. The context makes it difficult to perceive that intense presence in our lives. So, that moment of dismay, oh my God, it seems like I'm abandoned by the Lord. No, I'm not. This dismay is part of His protection in our life. Because those who love know very well that love also needs to go through the harsh experience of unprotectedness, because excess love unprotects. Isn't that how it works? When a person is excessively protected, in the end, in contrast to all of this, there is unprotectedness because that person cannot mature. So, they'll be forever naive, forever believing they are in a fairy tale, and life is not a fairy tale. So believing in God's protection doesn't give us the right to think that God will do everything for us, that He will walk for us. No. He will always be strengthening us ahead of these battles we are going to face, but we will be responsible for doing our part. It was like that with Moses. This song quotes Moses, right? It was this hand that helped Moses divide the sea in two. In this passage, there is a great richness that is in Exodus, when Moses is terrified because he took the people out of Egypt and went towards this promised land, promised. You see, it's also a bit protected. The promised land would be reached as a promise that God made to Moses as long as he encouraged himself to take that people out of slavery and cross the difficulties of the desert. You see, anyone who has had the opportunity to go to Israel knows very well what the desert is. You enter that desert to reach a place we don't know where it is, which is only in the heart of a man. As a promise, it's a great difficulty. And the people believed, followed Moses, began to experience the restrictions of the desert, hunger, began to miss the onions, because in Egypt they ate onions. In the time of slavery, onions were the main food. That's why sometimes we use the expression, "Don't keep crying over the onions of Egypt," isn't it? You must have heard that expression when someone advises you to stop lamenting the past. What is lamenting the onions of Egypt? It's saying, "Oh, I was a slave, but I had this food, I had onions to eat, and now I'm free, but I have nothing." Hold on. Give the desert time. Let the desert tell you what it needs to say. Even hunger, restriction, is very important in the human process. We identify all the time that people are spoiled because they lacked nothing. It's terrible when you have a child who has been pampered since childhood, lacked absolutely nothing, and suddenly, in the open field of life, suddenly that person needs to face life's desert, and they don't have enough ammunition to handle it. What do? How do we face the desert? At that moment, when Moses took the people out of slavery and encouraged himself to lead this people through the desert towards the promised land, he also felt fear. He also didn't know what it would be like. That's why, throughout the manifestations of God in that moment of Moses' life, he communicates with God. They are epiphanies, which are these glorious manifestations of God there through simple reality. It's the burning bush, it's the stone that gushes water. Anyway, God talks to Moses, gives him signs that he is on the right path, but doesn't shield him from the unprotectedness that the desert causes him. So unprotected in that desert, materially speaking, he can establish a trust in God that no other comfort had given. You see how interesting it is? How the unprotectedness, the apparent unprotectedness, has a whole reserved care. And behind the scenes there, just like you, who are a father, a mother, create a restriction for your child so that they can mature, isn't it? Sometimes you take something away from your child so that they really feel the lack, so that later they can appreciate it. I repeat, many people go wrong in life because they lacked nothing. Then you notice that when there is too much lack, it can also cause an imbalance, a lack of trust in life, in people. Anyway, it's balance that works. When you start educating by providing protection and apparent unprotectedness, where that person will have to face the situation alone, even if you're watching from afar. I faced extremely difficult situations in my life, where it wasn't enough for the other to say, "I'm here." Why? Because they were mine. Even help. Looking to the side, knowing that you have a friend with you, that there is a mother, a father, a brother. But in many moments of our lives, this ordeal is to be lived in solitude. It's when I need to experience this feeling of being unprotected. Just like Moses experienced stepping on the discomforts of the desert. By facing those discomforts, he understood what the human condition is. So I also make this experience. You do. I don't want to spend my life in blissful clouds. I really don't. And that's why, since I was very young, when life was difficult for me, I found something in that discomfort that made me think higher, that made me think beyond. Moses, experiencing the discomfort of the desert, needed to convince those who were with him that that discomfort would be worth it. Oh, but some wanted to go back to slavery. Look how human weakness is very present in our lives at times of discomfort. How many people, let me give you a simple example so you understand. There are people who need to break up with relationships that are terrible, disastrous. That person only brings harm to you, you know that. But you have a bond with them, you have an emotional need, you can't break up with that relationship. So, suddenly you encourage yourself, everything becomes clear to you. This person doesn't do me good. I can't marry this person because if in the time of dating, it's already like this, imagine in my marriage, later in my married life, it will become an even worse hell than it already is. Then you encourage yourself. You're motivated by people around you to break up. Then it's terrible on the day you break up. The suffering is cruel inside you. It seems like you'll never recover, that you only think about that person. Why? Because despite them causing you so much harm, you have a sick little bond with them of emotional dependency. You know they harm you, but you don't know how to live without them. Then you start taking steps. The first week is horrible. You suffer, you cry, you can't listen to the music, you can't smell, you can't see that little thing that they forgot there at your house. All of that is terrible. But suddenly you start taking steps towards liberation. It's as if you were walking towards a place that will only do you good. And a month later, that suffering gets better. 2 months later, that suffering gets better. And suddenly you're not even remembering anymore. Of course, there's still a silent bond there, being dismantled, because emotional dependency, it doesn't die overnight. It's like suffocating a cancer cell with chemotherapy, where you're removing the life from the cancer cell, which is the cell that kills us. Then let's say 3 months later, you meet that person again, and you have that famous relapse. There you go. The castle you were building, the ground you had walked, which had been so difficult, you throw away, and you go back to Egypt. You go back to slavery. You do the same thing that Moses' companions wanted to do, go back to eating the onions, go back to eating the rotten, spoiled food. Then you restart that relationship because it's sick, and you didn't maintain the necessary distance you should have kept. Because when you have that emotional dependency, you have to establish distance, because otherwise you won't heal. You have to stop wanting to know about that person's life, because otherwise you won't heal. You need to stop snooping on their Facebook, because otherwise you won't heal. You need to stop investigating their life. Where were they? What were they doing? You have to cease all points that may make you want to go back to Egypt, because otherwise you'll never be free. Then, 3 months later, you're beautiful and splendid already, killing the cancerous cell. You go give a few more kisses, go back to that horrible dependency, and hell returns to your life. In your first week, it's okay that everything is coming back. Soon, my daughter, you're in a worse hell than you were 3 months ago. That's how it is. When we don't know how to live the discomfort that builds us up, we sabotage ourselves all the time. It's like stopping drinking, stopping smoking. You stop smoking for a year, and you celebrate because you stop putting that carcinogenic toxin in your body. And suddenly you go there and light up a cigarette for no reason. And that addiction comes back as if it were a monster, capable of eating you whole. There you go. All that sacrifice you made in the first days without smoking goes down the drain. Why? All that sacrifice goes down the drain. Why? Because you weren't able to live with the discomfort of renunciation. My people, it's amazing how God's hand assists us like this, making us aware of what we need to break in our lives. These are situations that we need to establish boundaries for, because otherwise, we will never be healed. We will be forever sick in the line of the needy, crying and begging for a little bread of kindness from others, a little bread of affection from others. For God's sake, we were not made for this. We were not made to drag emotionally dependent people around. We were made to love. And love only makes sense in our lives if it builds us up, if it helps us go through the discomfort of the desert. Otherwise, it makes no sense. This pseudo-love, this false love that sometimes we say we feel for each other, that doesn't help us in the discomfort of the desert. I need to live through my deserts. You need to live through yours. And true friends are those who recognize the deserts the other needs to go through and say, that's right. Let's go through this desert because you need it. Now, Apollonia, she's that happy, orderly life. Remember that character? Apollonia, where everything was a game of being content, right? Stop it. Kill that childish instinct that exists within you that makes you afraid of life's discomforts. Life's discomfort is when the well-lived only makes us better. Take off that victim mask that you stick on your face so others will eternally pity you. You're just wasting time in life like this. What nonsense. God holds our hand for us to be able to cross this desert. It's not to keep falling back and going back to eating the onions of Egypt because we felt sorry for ourselves, because we felt sorry for the other. No. The journey is forward. And there comes a moment when Moses stands before God and says, now you solve this situation because I don't know what else to do. They've already built a golden calf in the middle of the road. They've already caused trouble. They're already worshiping other things. So they're not even remembering that the Lord exists. They only don't go back because they're too far away. But they return in another way. They don't return geographically because they were already far from Egypt. They would die on the way. But they didn't return geographically, but they returned emotionally. Because sometimes we've already surpassed the territory of our physical slavery. I've already left prison, but the prison hasn't left me. That's how it works. I've already taken steps towards my freedom, but I haven't achieved my freedom. I haven't decreed the conquest of my freedom. So I remain emotionally attached to my past. Father Fabio, if God is omnipresent, is he the owner of good and evil? Dear one, the fact that God is omnipresent has nothing to do with the origin of evil, because omnipresent means being everywhere, the omnipresence of God. So God is here. God is there with you. He is present everywhere. The question of the origin of evil is a much discussed theological issue. We have a very beautiful reflection in Christian Catholic theology regarding the origin of evil. But the most important thing in all of this, because I know that what bothers us the most is this, is to think, if God is good, how can bad things happen? Who is responsible for all these bad things happening? We have an interesting explanation, which is the origin of sin. Sin as the door that opened for evil to have power over us. Then you have all the metaphor of paradise that was lost, of the apple that was eaten, of the expulsion of Adam and Eve, of that space that God had placed so that they could live in harmony. We have this parable as an indication that evil arose precisely at the moment when we broke the covenant with God. At the moment when Adam and Eve wanted to be others, wanted to be gods, they forgot about human condition, forgot who they were, and wanted to be who they could not be. And from the moment we want what is not rightfully ours, we begin to establish injustice. Have you noticed that? How many bad things happen? Precisely because we do not know how to recognize what is not ours. Why is theft inherently evil? Stealing something from someone is evil. That is evil because I do not respect the space that is delimited. It belongs to another, but I want it for myself. The same thing when you have the presence of evil. Life. When I go and kill someone, it is the lack of respect for what the other is. Violence has its origin in this. Now, what makes me evil? It's my adherence to this project. It is very dangerous for us to blame all guilt on the devil. Oh, it's the devil who wants this. It's the devil who makes it happen. Yes, but if the devil wants it, we are the ones who carry it out for him. Have you ever seen the devil walking the streets? No. I have seen diabolical people walking the streets. The devil himself, no. There is no problem here. We do not have a devil here. The other day, a woman asked me, "Father, do you perform exorcisms?" I stopped to think, how can I perform an exorcism? No. Then I thought, but immediately I said, no, there is a way for you to perform an exorcism. You love. Every time you love, my friend, the devil has no place with you. The devil cannot stand a person who loves. The devil cannot do absolutely anything in the life of a person who seeks goodness, who seeks partnership with truth. The devil begins to have a say in our lives when we open the doors for him to sit, to have a coffee in our house, to have a little whiskey with us. Then that's it. You start opening the doors. Oh, come smoke some marijuana. And the devil sits and smokes marijuana. Let's sniff some cocaine. It's the opposite, right? It's me who is adhering to what is a process of breaking within me. This week I was in Itapemirim. I met a young man there. I think his name is Paulo. During the show, I saw that he was very quiet, but I had already seen him like that because he was very close. And at the end of the show, he was already up on something, waving and singing. And then he asked, I understood that he wanted to talk to me. And then he came to the dressing room to give me a hug. And he said to me like this, "Father, I'm struggling to free myself from drugs." And then I hugged him and said to him, "My friend, freeing yourself from drugs is the same as you starting to love yourself again. Because drugs are nothing but a lack of love. I will judge within myself a toxin that will harm me. I will judge within myself a substance that will numb me, that will take away my awareness of things, that will distance me from the people I love, that will take away the peace of mind from the people I love." How sad it is. The drug addict does not see the suffering he causes. The mother who does not sleep, who until she sees her son coming home, no matter how bad he is, she likes to see him arrive anyway. She doesn't sleep because she keeps thinking, my God, where's my son now? So cutting with drugs is reestablishing the bonds of love that you have. When you say, I'm going to stop smoking this marijuana, I'm going to stop doping myself, I'm going to stop drinking, especially because the worst of all addictions for me is the socialized one, the one we do in front of everyone Alcohol is terrible, and every time a person decides to stop drinking, they are not deciding for themselves alone. It's also because of the people they are making suffer that they are destroying. It's so beautiful to see a person react because of the love they have for others. So, this is a beautiful thing to see. Now, evil, it enters into the context of our lives based on our choices. I choose evil. It exists. It is concrete. It is real. But it only tries to seduce. It is me who will adhere to it and will represent it in my life. More than knowing its origin, it is discovering a way to neutralize it. I don't know how evil entered the world. I don't have that answer. I have the suggestion that theology, that the parable gives me, but I don't have a ready answer for that. So what do I do? If I don't know how evil entered the world, I can avoid it entering me. That is what is right and possible. Only those who have read Father Fábio de Melo's books know how transformative they are. They make us reflect and change our perspective on life. If you haven't read them yet, don't miss this great opportunity. Learn more by clicking on the links in the description. Father Fábio, what can we do when fear prevents us from fulfilling what God wants from us? Fear is a natural reaction to everything that tends to be new in our lives. Of course, fear is a natural reaction to various situations in life. Fear is natural in us because it points us to what is a limit. Because I am limited, I am afraid. I'm afraid of burning my finger, so I'm limited. I can't put my hand in the fire. I know that. It's a limit I have. The limit of my skin, the limit of my physical condition. Now, when this fear of fire begins to prevent me from having a healthy relationship with everything that will have fire, for example, if I'm going to be near a bonfire, but I don't need to judge myself in it. It's the control we can exert over the fear we feel, which is always an experience of rationalization. The fire is there. I know it's dangerous for me, but I start to manage the relationship I have with it. Everything in life is like that. When I start to manage the fears I feel, I start to overcome them. I cannot allow fear to become an oppressive force that diminishes the quality of my life. We often tend to live in fear of novelty. Everything that will be new in our lives, the changes we will face. Who feels fear, for example, when they have to change jobs? We don't know if it will work out. Who will get married? Who will face a new lifestyle? Will always go through the experience of fear. Because novelty, we will leave a comfortable region, a reality that we are already accustomed to, and we will move to a new territory. And it is natural for us to be afraid of that. What is not natural is for fear to prevail. That is why we always need to be careful to manage new realities, always seeking that courage that minimizes the power of fear. When we feel that we are feeling too much fear and we are missing opportunities because of the fear we feel, we lose precious opportunities. The other day, I even met a girl who was sharing with me, "Father, I'm very afraid of growing in the relationship with my boyfriend because the last relationship I had made me suffer a lot." So she couldn't invest in the new relationship because she brought the scars of a relationship that was very tragic for her. It ended with a lot of suffering. She suffered a lot at the hands of that boy, that old boyfriend. So now she was facing the fear that if she loved again, she would have to go through the same situation she went through. And that's where we need to rationalize. It's the formula that often works. How am I going to rationalize a situation? How can this girl rationalize the fear she has of the new relationship? It's about thinking. This guy I'm dating now is not the same. He doesn't necessarily have the same personality as the one I dated before. It doesn't mean that what I experienced with the other, I will have to experience with this one too. That's rationalization. Because the big challenge, my people, is to put meaning and reason into what we feel. Put meaning into feeling. That is, shed light on what I am feeling and understand my feeling, which is not always true. Not everything I feel is true. So, I'm afraid of being betrayed again, but I may not have reasons for that. It may be that the person next to me today does not give me any reasons to feel this fear, but because I have marks from the past, today, I deal with her with fear, insecurity, It's interesting for us to realize that humans will always need healing. Often the relationship doesn't work today because we haven't healed from the relationship we had. That happened. That was tragic for everyone. So this thing of organizing life little by little as we live, correcting our feelings, doing emotional digestion. When we eat something that makes us sick, we have stomach upset, right? But when we also feel something that made us sick, we need to experience emotional digestion. That is the process of eliminating what was not good and keeping what was good. That's digestion. Well-done digestion is when the body keeps what it extracted from the food and throws away what is no longer good. It digested. When it doesn't digest, it's because the food stayed in the stomach. And since the stomach wasn't made to keep the food, but it was made only to be an instrument for that food to be digested and thrown, the proteins, vitamins, minerals from our food into the blood to continue feeding the body. The stomach wasn't made to be a storage place. We have upset stomach. The food stayed longer than it should have for some reason, either because it was spoiled or because it was too heavy, ate more than it should, right? Affection and feeling work the same way. And often I live this emotional indigestion like this, keeping inside me what should have been eliminated. Or judging for my effective life, what was the learning from everything I lived? If I don't do this digestion, I keep that as a bad thing and start projecting onto others what didn't work from that first experience. And that often makes us afraid. When we go into a relationship with another, bringing the marks of a past that was not good. Many times we take this also, not only in the dating issue, marriage, no, in friendship, no. In everything in life, sometimes we make the reading of the new that is before us with what we already have as experience. So the great challenge is to ensure that fear does not prevail, that what was the experience of the past does not prevail over us. Fear will always be natural because we will analyze life based on what we have already experienced. And if what we experienced we did not put in the right place, then we run the risk of making this experience always determinate for us, as it scares us, limits us, and prevents us from going beyond. But it is always good for us to make this effort so that this fear does not prevail. I lived through a tragedy that deeply unbalanced me. It happened in our family on December 30th, 2008. My 15-year-old niece, who was under my care, took her own life. I see two aspects. One positive, which is Jesus in my heart, absolves me of the guilt I carry. But there's also a negative aspect that often prevails, which is the result of my illness, which affirms to me that the blame for her death is mine. I feel the desire to go to the same building where she judged herself and repeat the same insanity. But thanks to Jesus and the work the Lord has done in my life, I lack the courage to displease God, and I do not want to sadden him with this lack of faith. So that the Lord may better understand my feeling of guilt, I will speak to you affectionately and briefly about my niece, Tatiana. She speaks of the girl, that she was a very special, very sweet girl, and that unfortunately, she fell into this absurdity of wanting to die, right? And she is experiencing a terrible aggravation, which is she is accused in the police investigation by her boyfriend, by Tatiana's boyfriend, of being the one to blame because of the curfew she imposed on their relationship. The boy claims that the girl was unhappy with this. The judge closed the case as there was no concrete evidence against the mentioned aunt, who is me. Father, the feeling I have is that Tatiana's whole life was pushed into an abyss, and I gave the final push. That's what kills me every day. My daughter, do not allow this to happen. We cannot enter the heart of the one who has passed away, and we cannot know the reasons. One thing is certain, it's foolish to think that your niece would kill herself because you set curfews for her relationship. No, Unfortunately, my daughter, our young people are arriving. You yourself were saying that she ended up in your hands precisely because of a difficult story that this girl already had. A child is like a house. If the foundation isn't good, it won't stand for long. That's how it is. You took this girl at a certain moment in life when you could no longer interfere with her foundations. It is very difficult for us to provide a life structure to someone who arrives completely unstructured. I'm not saying it's impossible. It is possible to help provide structure to someone who has never had it, but it will be much harder. And here, my friends, I extrapolate the conversation to speak to those of you who have children. Be careful. Be careful with what you are offering this child. Be careful with the home you're putting under this child's feet. All that you offer today will be decisive for the future. As a young person, as an adult, as an elderly person, we become who we are not by chance, but as the result of all the influences we receive. We are born and already start receiving these influences. And we need to fight hard for our home to be a place where people can truly be prepared. Human beings need to be prepared. We can't handle life just any way. We need structure. And to love is precisely to lend this structure. It is to grant the other the possibility of growing, of not wanting to die, right? Because suicide is slow, no one jumps from 1 hour to the next. The reasons gradually undermine our hearts. I remember the story of a young man in Taubaté, already in the last year of medical school, who was found dead, hanging from a rope. Imagine, a guy with his future ahead in the last year of medical school suddenly appears hanging there months before graduation. That rope isn't tied overnight. That rope is tied gradually. And if we don't take care, we also tie a rope around our neck. Living is the experience of condemning or saving. Living is the experience of accepting condemnation or accepting salvation. It passes all the time through the path of others, but it also passes through ours. Today we experience situations that condemned us or saved us. It's like adding or removing a segment of rope. Everything depends on the choice, on the selection we make. Life needs to be sifted, just like the prospector does. He takes that pile of dirt in a sieve and sifts it slowly until he sees if there's a precious stone or not. If there isn't, he throws everything away and starts over. The end of our day should always be a prospecting experience. Look at the sieve of the day. Look at everything that happened, everything you heard, everything you experienced, all the situations you faced, everything that fell before your eyes, everything you saw, everything you heard, and only keep what is precious. We waste a lot of time keeping junk. Throw it away. Don't take to your bed. Don't take to your sleep what was the rubbish of the day. Otherwise, it becomes a noose around your neck. It's amazing how much we slowly kill ourselves when we don't sift out what truly wasn't worth it. Now, if we insist on keeping everything that's worthless, then we truly tie knots in our rope around our neck. And suddenly, when you least expect it, you're ready to die. It's lamentable, but it's true. The wrong choices we make in life represent a rope we're tying around our own necks. I'm seeing with great happiness the recovery of a nephew of mine, whom I love very much, Conrado, a boy who for a long time, a handsome, intelligent, smart boy, chose to tie the rope around his neck. And today, thanks to God, because of eyes that see salvifically, of people who are lending him a new meaning to life, Conrado is having the beautiful experience of judging the segments of rope around his neck, recovering, rehabilitating himself, making peace with life. You can observe, sometimes we get mad at life, and every time we're mad at life, we start creating the possibility of death. That's what happened to your niece, my daughter. Unfortunately, she grew up mad at life. There was a lack of structure, a lack of love, a lack of attention. The home was not what she needed. And at a certain point, any little weakness, any difficulty, she jumps. Why? Because she's not prepared. She suffered too much. She can't stand life's problems anymore, lacks preparation to stay standing. That's why it's so hard to recover a person. Because it's at that moment that the quality of our education, of our structure, comes into play. It's like when I had hepatitis. I remember a phrase from Dr. Antonio very well. I said, "Doctor, what now? What are we going to do?" He said, "Father, now, we don't have to do anything. You have hepatitis, and now we'll see what your body can do with the problem you have." Likewise, when Robinho had cancer, I was so shaken by Robinho's illness that I sought out all the resources I could to see if we could save that boy. And then a friend of mine, who is a doctor, told me very harshly, very bluntly. I said to him, "So, during this recovery period, we'll change his diet, do this, do that." He looked at me and said, "Look, Father, we think all of this will change things. It's true that giving him a better diet will help a little with his recovery, but don't be fooled. It's the past that will determine things now. Everything that this boy ate, everything he experienced with his health, will determine now whether he will recover or not. Yes, my friend, life is like this. One day it confronts us with the choices we made. And then, because I had the opportunity to get out of that horrible situation, which my hepatitis complicated too much, because I was using terrible medications at that time, highly hepatotoxic, right? Imagine I was taking an anti-inflammatory because I was already feeling joint pain, right? It was already a symptom of hepatitis, but I didn't know it. I thought I had arthritis, osteoarthritis, all that bunch of things. I was taking a highly hepatotoxic medication for over a month when suddenly I found out I had hepatitis. Imagine a liver that was already suffering from hepatitis, still suffering from the wear and tear of heavy anti-inflammatories. The fragility of the body is immense. It can't cope. I almost needed a transplant. So what's the fight? The fight is all about a health process that, thank God, I was going through lately, with discipline in eating, sleeping, working. I was living right, thank God. I got sick at a time when I was living right, and then my body reacted. That's how life is, my friends. Sooner or later, we will be held accountable for what we nurtured within ourselves. Thank you for joining us today at Path of Faith. Your engagement means the world to us. So please take a moment to leave your comments, like this video, share it with friends and family, and subscribe for more enriching content.